Well, something a little different on that issue tonight, and it all stems from something that happened last week in Alberta. A contender for the leadership of the provincial Progressive Conservatives quit the race and the party, crossed the floor and joined the governing NDP. Why? Because Sandra Jansen says she was being harassed for her gender. And she read aloud in the legislature a number of online comments that she had received.
What a traitorous bitch. You are both a disgrace to Alberta, lying bitches. Now you have two blonde bimbos in a party that is clueless. Another useless tit goes NDP. Dead meat.
Well, the comments aimed at Jansen aren't isolated to her or to Alberta. Harassment of female politicians and some male politicians appears to have reached new heights. So tonight we want to talk about that. We've reached out to MPs on Parliament Hill, and you'll hear from some of them in a moment as they read aloud the attacks aimed at them. At the table tonight, Chantal, Althea, and Jennifer, all of whom have worked the federal politics beat for years. Andrew is away on this night. What did you make of that?
I was not surprised by the comments. I was surprised that it seemed to shock the Alberta legislature.
They all got up on their feet, all of them, all parties.
Yes, and I'm assuming that they all got up because they were also applauding themselves for having to put up with this. They can't have discovered it on that day.
Jennifer?
What I make of it in general is that as women take their role or their place rightfully in positions of power, that there are a small number of knuckle draggers that feel threatened, and they feel that they have to voice their displeasure, and unfortunately their voices are amplified by social media.
Althea?
I was surprised that she decided to use the legislature to make this point, because it's not surprising that female politicians, not just female politicians, many other politicians, especially often racist messages that some MPs get, but that she decided to use that platform to basically call to action her colleagues. I mean, obviously, in this case, it was basically directed across the aisle, but to tell people that they had a collective duty to fight this and to say something about it. That, I thought, was surprising.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, and as you've mentioned, it's not an isolated incident involving her. We've talked to MPs. I want to warn you here. We're going to run a minute or so of some of the comments they've received as they read them. It's pretty low-level stuff. It's raw. And we're just going to let them say for themselves the kind of words they've received. Watch this.
You dumb bitch. You stupid bitch. Why do you hate democracy, you dumb bitch?
You are a goddamn joke. Go home, cry baby, resign bitch. Don't make me come over there and elbow you in the tits.
Vagina is an asset. Always can be put in use one way or the other.
Nikki Ashton, you, madam, are a delusional.
To Miss Racist Immigrant, you fucking you're on British land, you racist chink.
I'd like to see Muslim Munsef's homely head on a pike pole planted outside Parliament Hill.
Wipe that smile off your face, you stupid bitch.
I've never said this word out loud before, so an entire tweet.
What the hell is up with this bimbo? I'm not a violent person, but she has a face I'd love to punch into next week.
You pathetic twat. You're just an over-entitled c***. Hope you understand how idiotic you look on the news today. Separate, pussy hoe.
Fire season has arrived early in northern Alberta. May wish you were in it, you bitch.
La grosse marde comme toi. Bravo à toi, espèce de petite salope de NPD.
What a cold-hearted bitch. What a disgusting pig.
Hey bitch, looks like you enjoy pointing your tits on Twitter, but don't want them to get elbowed. I call bullshit on you.
Le seul parti pour lequel tu aurais dû être élu, c'est celui du diable. Crise de suppôt de Satan. Fuck you, crise de bitch.
Surely Trudeau could find a better-looking slave bitch than Monsef. She's as homely as a picket fence.
Women aren't special. If you can't take the hate, get out of Parliament.
So, you know, we've got more women in politics now than ever before. We have a federal cabinet that's gender neutral, some provincial cabinets the same, and yet female MPs especially putting up with that. What do you make of that?
Same as female journalists who cover politics, sports, I'm guessing pretty much anything. Same vocabulary. There is not anything I've heard there that I haven't heard or read in an email, a letter. Before all this technology, I've had experiences where people would roll down their window and scream stuff like that as I was crossing the street to Parliament Hill. So, but I do agree with Jennifer that it's a minority that is overrepresented in the social media, but a minority in real life. I've always appreciated the fact that Canadians, when they like you, talk to you, and when they hate you, go on Twitter.
Some people are kind of reassessing what they think is a minority, though, and numbers as a result of, you know, elections that we've seen south of the border and some of the things that were said there and the support that was garnered by them.
I mean, there's been a lot of analysis around that just because you supported Donald Trump doesn't mean that you were part of that despicable group of people who speak to women that way. I mean, a lot of the tweets that were just read out are quasi-violent. I mean, that's a whole other kind of human being that feels that they can say something to someone that intimates violence. And I think it's a very specific kind of attack against women. Where you're saying, okay, I don't like you, and also I want to do something bad to you. But all of this doesn't take away the fact that women are advancing. And I would point out that the women cabinet ministers, for example, have among the highest profile positions now in government. Their image in the public sphere is, I think, the highest that we've ever seen. All of the key portfolios are held by women now. And I'll just come back to the fact that there are people that just don't like that. They just don't like that.
Well, that's what I wonder. I mean, you know, with the positions rising, is the minority becoming more vocal? And is that all because of social media or what?
But that is also what happened to Francophones when Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, became Prime Minister, and there were more Francophones on the public scene who seemed to have more power in federal politics. And the stuff you'd hear in Toronto or elsewhere about French-speaking Canadians at that point was really nasty. And I don't think it's just women. It's the sense that people are taking over, different people are taking over from people who have perceived themselves as the majority. Social media empowers it, but I don't think there are more of those than there were before. They're just more empowered.
Yeah, I think it amplificates the message. And people see that the views that they hold, that maybe the greater society says this is intolerant and you cannot say this, feel that there's an acceptability because they see other people do it. And so they all gang up against each other. But I do think it basically speaks, whether you're talking about misogyny online or you're talking about racist messages, it basically comes from people who want to silence you and who are upset with the message that you're giving. So whether it's you're talking about a female leader who decides to put gender as a major issue and they feel like that should be silenced, or you have an MP like Omar Al-Gabra or Deepak Obrai who says something about the messages that they've received and then they get more vitriol thrown at them. I think that it's basically about silencing voices and making you feel like you should not be part of this sphere.
All right, you mentioned male MPs because we talked to many of them over this last week or so as well, and here are some of the things that they've received.
Chris Alexander should be a dead man walking. Canadians have a duty to ensure treacherous swine like Chris Alexander are not re-elected.
I got this message at the height of the Attawapiskat housing crisis, and I got it on Christmas Eve. I hope those Indians freeze to death.
It's not just the Syrian boy. His brother and his mother also drowned. Chris Alexander owns the death of this family.
Don't forget, you are a brown piece of shit, you Indian dog.
I hope they haunt you, Chris Alexander. When you push your kids on the swing, I hope you see those boys on the empty swings next to them.
Michael Chong is a Chinese spy. No Asians in the party. If you like inclusivity so much, why don't you go back to China?
All right, so this, crosses gender lines, and, and it's aimed at politicians. Like, hate isn't new. We've all faced it, as you've mentioned, we face it in our business too. But there's something specific here happening around politicians.
Yeah, I mean, I think that political discourse has taken an unfortunate turn. Although I think in the House of Commons things have been slightly better over the last year. But
maybe because they're all facing this. So these are MPs from all parties.
Yeah.
Here,
one thing I think people like us who have sizable followings on social media and politicians, one thing I think that might help is that all of us have people who follow us. The political parties have people bloggers and other people with their own large followings who tweet out messages that are in support. And sometimes it's those people that sort of create a storm of hate. I feel like politicians need to tell the hangers-on that have their own following that stir up these hate storms that, hey, I don't agree with what you're doing. And I think there was definitely a storm of hate around Chris Alexander, around the decision or the policy around Syrian refugees. And you see it happening. People with big followings, and they let it happen. They just let this sort of tirade of terrible messages go by, and they don't say anything.
There's a fundamental difference between politicians and people like us. Mm-hmm. They are elected. They have to read their Twitter feed. We don't. We can ignore it if we want. We know it's out there. But
why do they have to read it?
Because they're in the business of interacting with constituents. So inevitably, they're going to read the mail that comes their way. You have a choice. If you get a thick envelope that is full of Mansbridge or this and that, you have the option of not opening it, because that's not what you do. Your job is to inform. It's not to interact necessarily with every reader. So they're fundamentally different. But if I can say something about the role of the media in this, we have engaged in the business of clickbaiting. And our language and our titles have become more and more aggressive to get those clicks. And in so doing,
give me an example so we know what you're talking about.
God. It's not, I'm not saying it's a wrong headline, but Trudeau's going to get to show this week how ruthless he is. The column didn't say that Trudeau was going to be ruthless. It was about, could he make choices, fish or cut bait? But the title kind of invited you to click because it used very strong language. And the language we've used in titles has become stronger and stronger. And for the needs that we all know about clicking. But the opinion pieces have also become more a slap in your face than let's try to think this through. I'm not sure there's a huge constituency for that, but it normalizes this rather aggressive tone. When journalists go on Twitter and they treat people like that of morons on Twitter in their response, they are actually encouraging this because they are going down to the level of the morons who are writing to them. And you see it more and more.
All right. Hold your thought there, Althea, because we're going to take a short break. When we come back, a little more on this subject.
I'm not going to read you any hate because, frankly, I don't want to give those people a platform.
And we're back with Jennifer, Chantal, and Althea. One of the MPs we talked to didn't want to read quotes, even though she's had lots of them. Mm-hmm. Michelle Rempel, Conservative MP. Instead, here's what she said. I want to comment on this after.
I'm not going to read you any hate because, frankly, I don't want to give those people a platform. I would rather that you hear, through my voice, the voices of my constituents and ideas for good public policy. I certainly don't want to belittle the fact that abuse happens in public service. It does. When there are threats of violence, I've experienced those. The authorities, the police need to be contacted, and they're not acceptable. But I don't want to dissuade anybody who's listening to this from entering public service because I do feel it's a very worthy field and one that you can make a huge difference for your community in. So rather than us focusing on the negativity and the hate of others, my wish is that we all govern our own behavior accordingly. I'm not perfect, but that we focus on positivity and ways to make our country better rather than a few online trolls.
All right, well, let's pick up on that. First of all, Michelle Rempel wanted to say that on camera. A number of MPs had taken that same position, but they wanted to stay away from the cameras on this. It's, you know, the argument about whether to call people out, whether to pursue it or ignore it. What do you take from her approach? Althea, why don't you start?
I'm torn about it, actually. In fact, when you listen to the first wave of the MPs talking about some of the stuff they see, especially on Twitter, just this week, I saw Elizabeth May get far worse than what you read out loud. And she responded to one person in particular and said, "You're supposed to be somebody's husband," like he had on his tag that he is a loving father and husband and he exists. I went on Facebook to look him up. You don't want to give them more of a platform, and I feel like you don't want to tell them this bothers you, right? You want to be able to say that I'm tough enough. I don't need to give this any space. But at the same time, Sandra Jensen, who we started out with, she wanted to say that so that people would, to Jen's point as well, would respond and would tell their followers this is unacceptable behavior, and hoping to perhaps shame or shun these people from voicing. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that you need to respect different MPs or different politicians' stance on that issue.
All right.
I'm not brave enough to read that stuff, so I don't even block people. But I noticed that they drop away for lack of interest. They're like weeds. If you fail to water them, they dry up. So I'm of the ignore them school. I also think that when you retweet them, not only do you expand their audience, but you're also desensitizing the audience by putting stuff like that out on a large, well-followed feed.
Where are you?
Well, I have, different ways of dealing with it. So often I'll just clear all my mentions so I don't have to see, like if there's a particular day where, as I mentioned, some of these people that stir the pot send all their army of orcs my way, then I'll just clear all of it so I don't even see it. And I block. I mean, I block mercilessly. If you're going to be an idiot, I don't want to know what you have to say. But as Michelle Rempel said, if they're going to threaten you with violence, I think you need to call the police. I mean, this is no joke. And I don't think we should stop talking about it so that we're pushing it down like it didn't happen. I just don't think we should be calling those people out. And I would just say one of the reasons, if people don't understand why it bothers women, it's because in real life, over the course of your life, you meet people in person that want to do you harm as a woman or want to degrade you, don't think you're worth anything. And so all of a sudden, those people you meet occasionally, but all of a sudden they're online in your face. And it gives you that sort of, sometimes a feeling of insecurity. Like, I don't mean personal insecurity, but your security of person is threatened. And I think that's why it bothers people so much.
It's not just women. And I think that because there are more of us now, we are able to use the space to talk about it. But a lot of people, especially I think men and visible minorities, have experienced this but did not feel like they had the safety net to voice those concerns.
Mm-hmm. All right. Challenging topic. You've given us a lot to think about. Appreciate your time, all of you. All right. The National will be back in just a moment. Wendy will have more for you right after this.